Kira had always been told to stay close to the colony, to avoid venturing too far into the dense, untamed jungle that covered much of Xenon 5. Her people, the Vethar, were a peaceful race with no real need for conflict, and they had cultivated a fragile harmony with the alien world they had chosen to call home. It wasn't that they were afraid of the dangers lurking in the wild, but that it was simply unnecessary. The colony provided everything they needed, and the Vethar had learned long ago that staying within the perimeter of their protected land was the key to survival. But Kira had never been one to simply follow rules. From a young age, she had been drawn to the unknown, to the mysteries that lay beyond the comfort of her home, the distant, shadowy treetops that whispered in the wind, the strange, melodic songs sung by creatures unseen. They all beckoned to her, whispering secrets just out of reach. She wanted to see the world for herself, to experience it, not just hear about it from the elders' stories. It was early morning when Kira made her decision. The skies over Xenon 5 were streaked with shades of lavender and amber, the lights soft and warm. The colony was still asleep, and the quiet hum of the city was a distant lullaby that Kira had grown up with. Slipping out of her family's dwelling, she moved swiftly through the empty streets, her translucent wings catching the first rays of the sun as they shimmered in the early light. The Vethar wings were delicate, veined like those of a dragonfly, and they could carry her effortlessly through the air for short distances. However, the jungle was dense, and flying too high could attract the attention of predators. She had learned that the hard way. With her wings folded carefully behind her, Kira moved quickly through the trees that surrounded the colony, her light footsteps barely disturbing the foliage beneath her. The jungle was alive. She could hear the calls of strange birds echoing through the air, and the soft rustling of leaves as unseen creatures skittered across the forest floor. Despite her excitement, Kira could not help but feel the weight of unease settle in her chest. She had ventured into the jungle before, of course, but never this deep. Today, though, she was determined to go farther than she had ever gone before. The scent of unfamiliar flowers filled the air, rich and intoxicating, and Kira marveled at the vibrant colors that painted the landscape around her. Towering trees, their trunks covered in thick moss, rose like ancient sentinels above her. Their leaves stretched wide, forming a dense canopy that blocked out much of the sunlight, casting the forest in shadow. Strange vines wrapped around the trunks like serpents, their luminous blooms casting an eerie glow. Kira paused to observe a group of small, bioluminescent insects flitting through the air. She had seen them before, but their beauty never ceased to amaze her. They resembled tiny floating lights, darting about in rapid bursts. The forest itself seemed to breathe, alive with a rhythm that Kira couldn't quite grasp. There was something magical about it, something that drew her in and made her feel alive in ways that the colony could not. She continued onward, pushing through the thick underbrush. Her sharp eyes spotted a path that led deeper into the jungle, a trail that seemed almost too well decimated to be natural. Kira hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was safe to follow, but curiosity overwhelmed her. With a flutter of her wings, she darted down the path. The deeper she went, the more the sounds of the jungle seemed to shift. The calls of birds grew distant, replaced by strange guttural growls and the low rumble of something massive moving through the forest. Kira's heart skipped a beat. She had heard rumors of the Dregots, the terrifying apex predators of Xenon 5, but she had always thought of them as little more than stories told to scare young ones into staying close to the colony. But now, with the air thick with tension and the ground trembling beneath her feet, she wasn't so sure. Kira's wings twitched nervously, but she forced herself to remain calm. The jungle was full of life and danger. She knew the risks, but she also knew that if she was ever going to discover the truth about Xenon 5, she had to press forward. A sudden noise made her freeze. A twig snapped somewhere ahead, followed by the soft scraping of claws against stone. Kira's breath caught in her throat. She turned her head, straining her ears, but could see nothing in the dense underbrush. The growls were getting louder now, closer. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her wings flared out, ready to take flight if necessary. That's when she saw them. A pack of Dregots emerged from the shadows. The creatures were terrifying. Their bodies were massive, reptilian in shape, their scales a mix of fiery red and orange, like molten lava caught in mid-flow. Their eyes were black, pools of endless darkness, and their mouths were filled with rows of sharp, serrated teeth, glistening with hunger. Each Dreget stood at least twice the height of a full-grown Vathar, their limbs ending in claws sharp enough to tear through metal. Kira's breath caught in her throat as the Dregets locked their gaze on her. Their growls deepened, becoming a low rumble of anticipation. They could smell her fear. They were hunting. She backed away slowly, her wings trembling as she prepared to take flight. The Dregets circled, their movements fluid and predatory, closing in from all sides. Kira's mind raced. She knew she couldn't outrun them on foot. Her wings could only carry her for short distances in the dense forest. Her pulse quickened as she assessed the situation. There was nowhere to go. No one would come to help. The jungle was unforgiving, and the Vathar colony was far away. The Dregets were closing in fast, their eyes fixed on her as they prepared to strike. "Please," Kira whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "I don't want to die here." Suddenly the ground beneath her trembled again, and a deafening crash erupted from above. The Dregets hissed in alarm, their heads snapping upward in unison. Kira barely had time to look before a figure descended from the trees above, landing with a thud on the ground between her and the predators. The figure was tall, armored, and armed with a weapon that pulsed with energy. The Dregots recoiled, their growls turning into confused snarls as they faced a new threat. Kira stared, wide-eyed, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. The human was dressed in a sleek, dark-colored suit of armor that seemed to shimmer in the dim light of the jungle. The helmet obscured their face, but the human's presence was undeniable, their confidence, their readiness, their power. Without hesitation, the human raised their weapon, a long, glowing rifle that hummed with energy, and fired. The bolt of light struck the nearest Dregot in the chest, sending it reeling backward with a screech of pain. The other Dregots hissed in fury and charged forward, but the human was already moving, their armor gliding with deadly precision. Kira had no idea who this person was or how they had appeared so suddenly, but she couldn't help the surge of relief that flooded her chest. She had been moments away from becoming prey, and now there was hope. The human fired again, and another Drago fell, its body convulsing as it crumpled to the ground. The remaining Dragos hesitated for a moment, their instincts warring with the unfamiliar danger posed by the human. Then, one by one, they retreated, hissing and growling in frustration as they disappeared into the jungle. Kira stood frozen in place, her wings shuddering in exhaustion. She had never been so close to death. But the human had saved her. The figure turned toward her, lowering their weapon, and slowly approached. Kira could now see their face, strong, confident, yet kind. It was a human, but one unlike any she had ever imagined. There was a quiet strength in their eyes, a determination that seemed to radiate from their every movement. "Are you all right?" the human asked, their voice calm and reassuring, though there was an edge of concern beneath the surface. "I didn't mean to startle you. You were in danger," Kira blinked, still trying to process everything. You saved me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. The human nodded. "That's what I'm here for. My name's Jack Connor. I'm part of the Earth Expeditionary Force. Looks like you've gotten yourself into some serious trouble, haven't you?" Kira's mind spun with questions. She had never met a human before, but now one stood before her, a hero who had pulled her from the jaws of death. How did you find me?" she asked, still struggling to find her voice. Jack smiled beneath his helmet, his eyes warm. "Let's just say I've been tracking the Dregets for a while. I was in the area when I heard your distress signal. Lucky for you, I'm good with a blaster." Kira didn't know what to say. She had so many questions, but one thing was clear. She had just crossed paths with someone who had the power to change everything. For the first time, Kira felt like she might just be ready to face the unknown.
Kira's wings fluttered with an almost imperceptible hum as she cautiously approached the human. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The Dregets, vicious, terrifying predators, had been moments away from tearing her apart. She'd been certain of it. And then, just as she had resigned herself to that fate, the human had appeared out of nowhere and dispatched them with an ease that left her breathless. and she had barely processed the fact that he had been there to save her before. Her mind was swimming with questions. The man, Jack Connor, stood before her, scanning the jungle around them as though nothing unusual had just occurred. He was tall, his presence commanding, yet there was an unexpected gentleness in the way he carried himself. His armor gleamed beneath the dappled light filtering through the dense foliage, and his weapon, still humming with residual energy, hung loosely by his side. His helmet had been removed, revealing a strong jawline and sharp, intelligent eyes that were now trained on her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Are you all right?" he asked again, his voice calm and deep. There was an undercurrent of concern beneath his otherwise composed demeanor, and Kira appreciated it, though she couldn't help feeling like she had just experienced something beyond her ability to understand. Kira started, her throat dry. She glanced down at her side where the Dregod's claw had scraped her skin. The wound stung, but it wasn't as bad as it had felt in the moment. A trickle of blue blood leaked from the gash, the iridescent liquid catching the light. "I'll be fine. I didn't expect to be saved." Jack's expression softened as he stepped closer. He reached into a small compartment on his armor and produced a small medical device. It was sleek, compact, and hummed with a faint glow as it activated. "Here," he said gently. "This will help. Let me patch you up." Kira hesitated for a moment, unsure. She wasn't accustomed to accepting help, especially from someone so unfamiliar. Her people prided themselves on independence and self-reliance, but looking at Jack, standing there, so calm in the face of the chaos he had just witnessed, she felt a sense of trust she couldn't explain. He was a human, a stranger to her, yet something about him seemed inherently reliable, like he was capable of protecting her, of standing between her and danger. With a soft sigh, she nodded. "All right, I don't think I can stop the bleeding myself." Jack's hands moved swiftly and the medical device hovered over her wound, a faint light pulsing from it as it worked to clean and close the injury. The pain subsided almost immediately as the device emitted a soft, soothing vibration. Kira's breath caught in surprise. She had heard of advanced healing technology, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. It was unlike anything she had ever imagined. "Is that," she began, still staring at the device, "is that human technology?" Jack glanced up at her, his expression a little more relaxed now that the immediate danger was over. "Yeah, it's a standard issue for field medics on missions like mine. It works on most species, though it might take some getting used to for different physiology." Kira nodded, her mind still trying to comprehend the rapid sequence of events. She had been seconds away from becoming prey, and now here she was, talking to a human. Someone from a faraway world, someone who was more technologically advanced than her own people. She was both awestruck and overwhelmed. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know how I would have survived if you hadn't shown up." Jack gave a small, knowing smile. "You're welcome. It's kind of my job, actually. I've been trained for this kind of thing. It's not the first time I've had to deal with hostile wildlife. Xenon 5 is not exactly a vacation spot." Kira Zen let out a short laugh, though it was tinged with the remnants of her fear. "I can tell. I've never seen anything like those creatures before. I thought I was going to die." Jack's expression darkened slightly as he looked at the ground. "The Dregots are nasty. They're territorial and they've been getting more aggressive lately. If you're not careful, they'll hunt you down. They're relentless." Kira shuddered at the thought. She had heard the elder stories about the Dregots, their savage, almost animalistic behavior, but she had never thought the tales were anything more than exaggerated fables. To see them up close, to feel their menacing presence, had shattered her naive perception of the world she thought she knew. "So, why are you here?" Kira asked, her curiosity now outweighing her fear. "You're not from around here, you're human. I've never seen a human before. I didn't even know humans existed." Jack raised an eyebrow at her statement, and a slight grin tugged at his lips. "Well, you're not wrong. We're a bit of a rarity around here. But we've been monitoring Xenon 5 for a while now. There's been an uptick in aggressive species behavior, and the Dregots are just one of the problems we've been sent to investigate." Kira frowned, confused. "Sent? Are you a soldier? A warrior?" Jack shook his head, his smile fading into something more serious. "Not exactly. I'm part of the Earth Expeditionary Force. Our mission is to assess planets like Xenon 5 for potential hazards, mostly to human colonies. We're not here to take over or conquer. We just need to make sure that the planet's issues don't spread elsewhere. Xenon 5's got its share of dangerous creatures, but there's also a lot of unexplored potential. It's a delicate balance." Kira's mind raced as she processed his words. She had always believed that the universe was divided into those who were capable of surviving the wilds of uncharted worlds and those who were not. Her people had learned to coexist with Xenon 5, forging a life of peace in a place of harshness. But humans, Jack specifically, seemed to operate in a completely different way. They didn't just survive, they actively sought out danger, studied it, and neutralized it. That's a lot to take in, Kira said, finally sitting down on a nearby log, her wings folding behind her. You're saying that you're here to protect humans from Xenon 5's dangers? Jack sat down next to her, glancing up at the trees above them, his eyes thoughtful. Yeah, that's the gist of it. But it's not all about protecting humans. There are other species here like yours who are just trying to live. And that's where the problem lies. Some of the aggressive creatures like the Dregots threaten all the species on this planet. We're trying to understand why they're becoming more hostile and how we can stop it without causing more harm to the ecosystem. Xenon 5's fragile, and if we're not careful, we could make things worse. Kira stared at him, wide-eyed. You don't want to conquer the planet? Jack shook his head emphatically. No, Earth's not like that. We don't conquer, we protect. But protecting means understanding too. Xenon 5's unique. Most planets like this don't have such complex ecosystems. There's a lot of interdependence, a delicate balance that could be upset if we're not careful. And if that happens, he trailed off as if the weight of the situation had just dawned on him. Kira could sense the heaviness in his words, and for the first time, she saw him as more than just a soldier, more than just an outsider. There was a deep sense of responsibility in his gaze, a quiet understanding that there was much more at stake here than either of them could have imagined. I didn't know, Kira said, her voice soft. I never thought about the dangers that others, humans or any species, might face. We've learned to live in harmony with the planet, with what it gives us. But I never thought about the bigger picture. Jack turned to her, his expression softening. It's easy to get caught up in what's right in front of you, but sometimes you have to step back and look at the whole picture. And that's where things get complicated. Not everything's as simple as it seems. The two of them sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the jungle filling the space between them. Kira's thoughts swirled around what Jack had said. She had lived her entire life in the peaceful confines of the Vethar colony, disconnected from the larger universe. Now, with Jack by her side, she was learning that everything was interconnected, and that understanding, though frightening, was something that could not be ignored. After a long pause, Jack stood up, brushing the dirt off his armor. We should get moving. The Dregots won't stay gone for long. I'll make sure we get out of here safely, but we'll need to stick together. Kieran nodded and stood up as well, feeling a sense of determination wash over her. Lead the way, Jack. I think it's time I see more of this world than just the colony. Jack smiled, offering her a hand. I thought you might say that. Kira hesitated for a moment before accepting his hand, their fingers brushing for the briefest of moments. In that touch, Kira felt something stir within her. An understanding that whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't be facing it alone. And that thought, more than anything, gave her hope. Kira couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting beneath the surface of her world. Since meeting Jack the human, her life had become a whirlwind of confusion and awe. Each moment felt like an unfolding mystery, one that she could never have imagined in her quiet, routine life within the Bethard colony. For all of her young adulthood, she had been content with the harmony of her people's existence, sheltered beneath the protection of their lush environment. But now, she was seeing her home in a new light, and what she saw unsettled her. As Jack led the way through the dense jungle, Kira was struck by the contrast between the calm beauty of the world around her and the undercurrent of tension that seemed to pulse just out of sight. The sky above them had shifted into an ominous gray, the vibrant pinks and purples of the morning now replaced by a more muted, stormy hue. The air was thick with humidity and the sounds of the jungle had changed. Gone were the melodic, peaceful calls of the birds and insects she had grown up with. Instead, the jungle seemed to hold its breath as though aware that something was amiss. Even the trees, which had always stood tall and sturdy, seemed to lean closer together, as if hiding something within their depths. Jack moved with purpose, his keen eyes scanning the environment. His armor, though sleek and fitted for mobility, seemed to shimmer with an unnatural sheen, adapting to the surroundings as though camouflaged in the jungle. The weapon slung across his back, a high-tech rifle that glowed faintly, was a clear indicator of the technology humans possessed. Technology far beyond anything the Vitar had ever encountered. It was almost too much for Kira to wrap her head around. The gap between their civilizations so vast. Stay close, Jack said quietly, his voice serious. We've crossed into a more dangerous part of the jungle. The Dregots are only one threat. There are others here too. I've been tracking some strange energy readings. Something's off. Kira's heart raced as she followed him, keeping her wings tucked tightly behind her to avoid brushing against the foliage. She had always known that the jungle could be dangerous. Her people had spent generations learning to read its rhythms, to understand when to hide, when to leave, and when to engage. But Jack's words held a weight she wasn't sure how to process. Strange energy readings, she asked, her voice low with curiosity. Jack glanced back at her, his eyes narrowed with concentration. I've been detecting bursts of radiation that don't match any known patterns. It's not natural to Xeno 5. Whatever's causing it is an anomaly, and it's getting stronger. The phrase getting stronger sent a shiver down Kira's spine. If whatever was causing these disturbances was growing in intensity, it was a sign that something was coming, and it would not be something her people could ignore. What do you think it is? She asked, though the thought of an unknown threat looming over them was almost too much to bear. Jack paused for a moment, looking up at the canopy above them, his brow furrowed as if trying to piece together an answer from the silence of the jungle. I'm not sure yet. It could be a weapon, something left behind by an advanced species, or it could be something worse, a natural phenomenon that's been disturbed. Either way, we need to find the source before it gets out of hand. Kira's stomach clenched. She had never considered that their planet, their home, could harbor something dangerous like that. The Veda had always been content to live in balance with the world, building structures and ways of life that mirrored the peacefulness of their surroundings. The idea that something could threaten all of that was terrifying. Is it something you can stop? Kira's voice trembled slightly, though she quickly regained her composure. Jack turned to her, his expression unreadable. We don't know enough yet. That's why we're out here, to figure out if this is something we can contain or if we need to get out before it spreads. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air between them. Kira's thoughts were a jumble of questions and fears, but she held them back. Jack was a soldier, or whatever he was, trained to handle threats like this. He seemed unshaken, despite the gravity of their situation, and for some reason, she found herself believing that if anyone could find a way to handle this, it was him. She didn't know why, but she trusted him. The jungle grew denser as they moved further in, the trees rising higher and the undergrowth thickening. Kira felt as though they were entering a world that was not meant to be seen, a hidden realm beneath the surface of the planet, shrouded in mystery. Every step felt like they were trespassing on something ancient, something that had been hidden away for eons. It was exhilarating, but also a little terrifying. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A low rumble, distant but powerful, vibrated through the earth, and the jungle seemed to react. Birds scattered from the trees in a flurry of feathers, and a distant roar echoed through the air. Jack froze, his body tense. What the hell was that? He muttered under his breath, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon on his back. Kira's wings fluttered uneasily. That was no animal. It came from deeper in the jungle. Whatever it is, it's massive. The tremor came again, stronger this time, shaking the ground beneath their feet. It was followed by a shriek, a high-pitched sound that made Kira's blood run cold. The noise reverberated through the trees, sending a wave of unease down her spine. Jack's eyes widened, and he immediately turned to face Kira. Stay close. This isn't good. Before Kira could ask what he meant, the ground erupted. A massive dark shape broke through the earth and rock, rising up like a living mountain. The creature was enormous, its body covered in thick armored plating that shimmered with an unnatural sheen. Its legs were like columns, powerful and muscular, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, otherworldly light. The creature had the unmistakable presence of something ancient and unfathomable. Kira gasped, taking a step back. What is that thing? Jack's hand was already on his rifle, his stance defensive. I don't know, but it's not friendly. The creature bellowed, its voice a thunderous roar that sent a shockwave through the jungle. It was as if the very planet itself had unleashed something that had been buried for centuries. The ground trembled again as the creature's massive body shifted, its attention now focused entirely on them. We need to move now, Jack said, his voice firm. He grabbed Kira's arm and pulled her back, urging her to run. Stay on my tail, and don't look back. Kira could barely process the situation. The sheer size and power of the creature were overwhelming. There was no place in the world she had known that could have prepared her for this. But Jack's determination kept her grounded. He was a stranger, but he had saved her once before. And now she was going to have to trust him again. They ran, their footsteps crashing through the underbrush as they scrambled to escape the creature's path. The jungle seemed to close in around them, the dense foliage adding to the sense of claustrophobia. Kira's heart pounded in her chest, her wings tucked in tight as she focused on keeping pace with Jack. The roar of the creature echoed in their wake, its immense presence following them with relentless persistence. But despite their frantic flight, Kira could feel the creature gaining on them. It was too fast, too powerful. No matter how fast they ran, it was only a matter of time before they were caught. Kira's breath hitched. She was beginning to panic. They couldn't outrun it. They needed a plan. They needed help. Jack, she gasped, her voice tight with fear. What do we do? It's going to catch us. Jack's voice remained calm, though his face was taut with concentration. I'm thinking, just keep moving. They burst into a small clearing, and Kira's eyes widened as she spotted something in the distance. A cluster of ancient stone structures, half hidden beneath the tangled vines and roots of the jungle. They looked like ruins, long forgotten by time. Over there, Kira shouted, pointing to the ruins. We can take shelter in those ruins. Jack glanced over, his eyes flicking to the structure before he nodded. All right, move fast. Together, they sprinted toward the ruins, the creature's growls growing louder behind them. Kira could feel its hot breath on her heels, and she pushed herself harder, her heart racing with terror. The moment they reached the ruins, Jack stopped. He turned to face Kira, his expression intense. Get inside, now. Kira hesitated, but only for a moment. The creature was closing in, and they had no other choice. She ran toward the nearest opening in the stone, ducking inside just as the creature's massive foot slammed into the ground behind her. The earth shook once more as the beast shook just short of the ruins. Jack followed her inside, drawing a breath of relief as they entered the shadowed confines of the stone structure. The walls, covered in ancient carvings and symbols, seemed to pulse with an energy that was alien and powerful. We're safe for now, Jack said, breathing heavily. But we're not out of danger yet. Kira could only nod, her mind reeling from the intensity of the situation. This was no longer just an adventure. This was survival, and the planet's secrets, whatever they were, had just become a whole lot darker.